But my questions are going to be definitely from the stuff that you've done in the past, particularly Spaced. I'm sure everyone else here has some stuff as well. So if you guys want to, feel free to start lining up on the mic. My first question is this, actually. I've noticed that most of your works it actually makes reference, a lot of musical reference. Again, thank you for making reference not only to the House Martins, but also Sisters of Mercy and Primal Scream. I was actually hoping you would bring the member of Primal Scream with you, like Bobby. Bobby Gillespie, just get him out of your pocket, just like. I was hoping that.
I've never really met any of those guys actually. Simon has, I think. I haven't met any of the Primal Scream guys. I'm not sure if they're aware that we used the song to save the world in this movie.
It's a perfect song.
And the music in this was really important. Like, it was something that when we were writing the script, we only listened to songs from that period when we were writing. I made this playlist that was like about 200 tracks long, and it was all like 1988 to like 1993, with the exception of The Doors. The Doors is the one that screws up because that's not from the 80s or 90s, or British. Everything else is from that period.
Count the soundtrack, that counts, 91.
What, sorry? Oh, I guess it does, although that song isn't in the soundtrack, so you're wrong. I don't think that song is on that soundtrack. But yeah, but definitely that's probably why I was listening to it around that time. It's because of that film, probably, so you're right. Anyway, I digress.
What do you really think of the Stone Roses album, their debut album? Really? What do you really think of
the debut album? Yeah. It's fantastic.
Okay.
The second one, Simon is the fan of the Second Coming.
Really?
I didn't think I ever even bought the Second Coming. But Simon's the one. The line is Shaun of the Dead about their second album being underrated is his line. But the first album is amazing.
It is.
Has anybody seen Shane Meadows' documentary about the Stone Roses?
I have. It's really good.
It came here a couple weeks ago. It was one show. Yeah.
We're going to try to get it here, hopefully.
You've got a very dramatic echo, sir.
This question. Is it my next question or just?
Yeah,
go for it.
Okay,
you sound like Hulk right now.
Well, I know you've done a lot of genres and a lot of homage in your past works. I love everything from space, all the way through Scott Bowman. But is there like a genre that you haven't tackled yet, or like a film you want to pay homage to that you haven't done yet, or like maybe a genre?
I suddenly felt like I was talking to a ghost. You are still alive. I was very distracted. You are here with us on this spiritual plane. Is there any genre that I'd like to tackle?
Yeah, like what you want to do, or like maybe one you want to revisit, or like just another film you want to pay homage to because you got like Night of the Living Dead, a lot of buddy cop movies, or maybe Invasion of the Body Snatchers. But
yeah, I think in terms of these three films, like Shaun, Hot Fuzz, and World's End, the idea was to sort of take like almost like a relationship comedy and fuse it with like another genre. So, and this one probably more obviously than the others, like is much more, like almost like a midlife crisis film, fused with like an alien invasion film. Other than that, I think I'd like to just, like in terms of what genre do I want to tackle, I'd like to tackle them all. Like I think sort of the nice thing about making movies is that, you get to tell different stories. And so probably one of the reasons I haven't revisited or there's never been any sequels to the movies is because it takes so long to do. Take at least like 2 years, maybe 3 years that you want to keep moving forward and doing different things. So I'd like to sort of tackle all kinds of, and I'd like to do some sort of straight versions of those. So if there's one that I'd return to, it would be horror. I'd love to do like a straight horror film sometime. I think that would be really like a real challenge.
I'd love to see it.
I have a follow-up question to that. Since you mentioned horror, do you have any plans or any interest in possibly doing a movie version of the trailer that you did for Grindhouse? Don't. And that'd be perfect, by the way.
Well, I think you've already seen the best version of Don't. And it was 90 seconds long. So if every other director who did one of those trailers makes a feature out of one of those trailers, I want to be the holdout. No, I think the joy that trailer is one of the most fun things I've ever done. But like, part of the joy of it is that it makes absolutely no sense. And so giving that film plot is sort of anti-don't. So,
makes sense.
so probably not.
My turn. Hi. Obviously I'm a huge fan of your work, and I can't imagine anyone who is better to ask this question of than you. I'm graduating from here in about a week and a half with degrees in business and economics, and I just, for fun on the side, I make films and enter competitions whenever I can. All I want to do is live in London and make films. That's my dream. So, to you,
know the weather's not much better than him.
Yeah, I figured that's why you chose to come right now. Also. So I just wanted to ask you, what should be my first step? What's the best thing I can do right now?
I think you just got to try and make your own stuff, really. I mean, I think the key is that you sort of have to get recognized on your own terms. You don't want to like wait for somebody to give you the money to do something. It's like you can make a film for absolutely nothing. Like, and I think, you know, how I got kind of my break was just by making like short films. You know, back then I didn't have like YouTube or Vimeo or anything like that. It was just like sort of making things on VHS and trying to get them into festivals and just get them onto TV and stuff. But I didn't have any connections in the industry at all, and I didn't really have any money either. I just like thought they were all like, some of them actually are on, one of them is on the Hot Fuzz Blu-ray, if you've ever seen that, with like a film I made when I was 18, as an example of what I did to kind of get noticed. I think also sometimes it's a good thing not to be like, I made like films in my hometown and I was in the West Country, and so when I made my first feature that was like in, like, you know, the west of England is not a million miles away from Georgia, in that it's like more sort of rural. It's not kind of like one of the massive, I know Atlanta is a massive city, but like it's you know, it was outside of London. Like in the UK, there's only London is the only real sort of cultural metropolis, and having made films outside of London, you know, meant that I could make an impact on my own terms in a way. Like, I realised that when you then move to London, you're one of hundreds of thousands of people who want to be dressed and stuff. So I was quite kind of like glad that I'd done something where it's like, oh, he's that kid who made that Western in the West Country. So there was like something to sort of distinguish yourself from like everybody else. I mean, but I think the thing is that I think you just have to kind of like sort of be tenacious. I think the main important thing is don't wait for any handouts. Like, nobody's ever gonna, like, you have to kind of make your own opportunities, and, you know, you can't blame it on anybody else. You have to make your own luck, really. So I think that sometimes you meet kind of people who are like sort of want to make their first feature, and there's like a million reasons why they can't get off the ground, but like really there's no reasons why you can't get off the ground. If you have enough kind of tenacity and sort of passion, you're gonna do it. And the other important thing is don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to sort of screw up, because I think sort of a lot of people kind of, me, myself included, sort of try to make a perfect film like straight out of the gate, and it will take you, as it took me like a number of years for like what was in my head to match up with what I'd actually made, and it was always a source of frustration that like, oh, I can't. I've got this thing in my head and I don't know how to get it onto the screen, and that's something that just takes time. But you should be worried if that doesn't happen first time out. So there's a bunch of advice.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to Atlanta. Hope you
No worries. What actually got you into like getting into filmmaking? Did you always thought that from a little wee lad that you always wanted to make movies?
I was always a film fan, and I knew I wanted to do something in that. I knew I wanted to do something in movies, but I didn't exactly know what, and I didn't have any ties to the industry, so it always seemed something that was so far away, and just
take the thing off. Yeah, take it out.
Hi. First of all, I wanted to, I guess, on the behalf of the kind of comic community and I guess this room, wish you the best of luck on Ant-Man. I know that's a really difficult character to tackle because it's not huge and pop culture. He's not Spider-Man.
Well, he's tiny, isn't he?
Yeah. But my question was, when you were working on Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, which is probably my absolute favorite film, and especially the soundtrack, was Beck always your first kind of vision of the music of Sex Bomb? Because that's exactly what I kind of imagined the music to sound like when I was reading the comic before the movie came out.
I think so. I think it's also myself and Brian Lee O'Malley were both fans of his, and I'm pretty sure that like he used to make these kind of like playlists for each book that were like songs that he was listening to, and then I used to send him songs as well. So I know that we used to sort of exchange various Beck songs. And then Nigel Godrich, who did the score, had produced a bunch of Beck albums. So we basically went for our A-list choice first, of like, well, let's ask Beck to do Sex Bomb. And he said yes. And the amazing thing about those songs that are in the film is that he did them in his like garage, like over like a weekend. And those are the demos. They never did any more work to them because they're all done on an 8-track, and they just sounded like scuzzy and great. So that music that's on the opening credits is a demo with him sort of just improvising the whole thing. It's like they just were jamming, and it sort of sounded like that, but it's still like Beck jamming. So we never got him to do anything more to that track. It's just like, so a lot of those songs are like his first like run at it, and then we'd sometimes get, and then in some cases we got the actors to re-record the vocals, you know. And
was it kind of the same thing with Metric and what was Dude Crashing the Boys?
Broken Social Scene.
Yeah.
Metric was different because they already had a song which they hadn't used on their last album, which was great, and then I can't believe they didn't use it on their last album. It was amazing. Great. So they had a song that they said, oh, we might have something that we've already done, and so they'd done demos of it but never recorded it. So they recorded it, and then Crashing the Boys, that was Broken Social Scene. They wrote the songs like for the. There's a funny story about that. They wrote the songs for the film, and the kid who plays Crash, whose name is Eric Knudsen, like Kevin Drew, who's the lead singer of Broken Social Scene, there was about 4 of them were like trying to go through the songs, and then he called me kind of getting all method and stuff, and he goes, we can't really do the songs without knowing what the kid who plays the part looks like. He goes, have you cast that kid? I said, we have actually. And he goes, can that kid sing? I said, I think he can. I think he's in a band. He goes, well, can we get him down into the studio and just do the songs with him? So Eric Knudsen was like 21, and I called him and I said, hey Eric, do you know the band Broken Social? And he goes, only my favourite band. I said, well, get this. I said, tomorrow you're going to go down and record with them. So then he went down and did those songs with them in the studio. So there was Broken Social Scene playing with him singing. Can you imagine being a fan of that band? And then that happening. So then like I think Kevin took him to like a bar and they were all getting drunk, and then he called me and goes, Eric's now a member of the band. Eric's now an honorary member of Broken Social Scene. So it was good, like everybody like sort of, it was really nice to do those collaborations where different artists did it in with their own methods. Metric did their song in their studio, Beck did it in his garage, Cornelius did his bit in Japan, you know, so it was like, most artists now have their own kind of studio recording stuff, so we actually left them to their own devices to do the song, so it was cool.
Thank you.
I was wondering, are there any type of new music that you kind of like listen to right now, especially like if it's come from England, or I guess like where's some new music that you're currently into right now that's currently playing on your iPod?
Oh.
Musical device.
I'm trying to think of a band that you guys won't have heard, or you've probably heard of all the hip English bands. There's a band called Everything Everything that are quite sort of, does anybody know that band? One lady. two ladies. They're worth checking out. They don't think they've come over here yet, but they're sort of arty and odd, a bit like Talking Heads.
As a aspiring filmmaker, or current filmmaker who's only made a few shorts, something I've learned is finding your own voice. Where does that come from? You've been a huge influence on mine. I appreciate that. And to that end, what I've learned is play for keeps, take every chance you get, just like you said, make your own luck. To that end, how likely, if I just said, hey, can I have a job, would it be if you gave me a job? And if not a job, maybe some sort of mentorship where I can email you once a month and say, hey, here's what I'm working on, what do you think?
Let's talk about it afterwards. That's sort of like sort of. The thing is, if I said no, I would look like a monster. So you put me on the spot. I'm not really sure, like, sort of exactly. We'll figure out.
I appreciate it. But also, a more public question I have. I love Atlanta. It's where I'm born and raised. How does where you're from affect what you've made? Where does that voice come from?
I think it's a big part of it, especially in the 3, like, British films, because, you know, I grew up in a small town, like, so the towns in Hot Fuzz and The World's End are not dissimilar from where I grew up.
And you shoot Hot Fuzz where you grew up?
Hot Fuzz is shot where I grew up. And Newton Haven is definitely modelled on it. Like, it's just, you know, when you're from a small town, you just can't, you literally can't escape it. That's what most of the movies are about. Like, sort of just, you know, mentally you can't kind of escape it. But I think one of the big things that inspired me in a way is because where I grew up, it was very, very pleasant, but kind of boring. You know, there was not like a lot, you know, sort of, even the whole joke of Hot Fuzz is that, you know, in my hometown, the crime rate was, you know, sub-zero. There's like nothing happening. And there's certainly no gun crime, because you don't really have that much gun crime in the UK, certainly not outside of the big cities. So I think that's the thing of like sort of escapism born of like boredom and frustration in a way. So you think you get a very different, I think that's very true of like sort of like you can tell a lot about a director's upbringing by what kind of films they make in a way. You know, probably people who like live in the big city sort of have a slightly different view of things. And especially with World's End, the films that sort of inspired me would be those kind of like sort of sci-fi films or TV shows that would be set in small towns, you know, whether it's like Doctor Who or the Avengers, the original Avengers, and then films like Village of the Damned and Body Snatchers and all the Quatermass movies, which are, you know, usually what they do is like they sort of like have these like sort of world-changing events, but because they wouldn't have the budget to do like the whole planet, they would just concentrate on this village. Or, you know, if you had American films, it would always be a desert town in New Mexico. It'd be like where the entire fate of the world like rests on that. So those films would always have an impact on me. But I think growing up, like, you know, kind of like, especially like crime and action films would seem like so like a universe completely removed. Something like Dirty Harry would seem as fanciful and strange to me as Star Wars, like, you know, where I was growing up. So I think that's where a lot of my stuff comes from, is the sort of daydreaming aspect of it.
Good deal. Thanks, Bridget.
Cool. Speaking of Doctor Who, you worked with Stephen Moffat on the script for Adventure Tintin. How come have you not yet directed or even wrote a script for episode of Doctor Who? I mean, is that something that you might be interested in? Or?
I did get offered to direct one of the first ones of the new batch with Christopher Eccleston, but I was busy doing Shaun of the Dead stuff, so I couldn't do it. But I do watch it, and I enjoyed the 50th anniversary. And a lot of my friends, like Mark Gatiss, who's one of the main writers and producers on that, and on Sherlock as well, I've known for, you know, about 15 years, and so it's great to kind of see, because, you know, when I was a kid, like, you would not admit to liking that show. Around the time when that show got cancelled, like sort of in the like sort of 87, it was, or maybe 89 was when it finally got cancelled. It was like it was not cool in the slightest. So it's always amazing to me and great that, like, you know, 25 years later it's on the cover of Entertainment Weekly. That sort of just it blows my mind. So I'm always a very sort of you know, like the 70s episodes of Doctor Who kind of had a sort of impact on this, because in the 70s, the John Pertwee, Tom Baker years, they didn't have enough money, they had kind of budget cuts, and so they'd always be stranded on Earth. And those would be my favourite episodes. All the ones with the Unit and the Autons and like Android Invasion, which kind of like is similar to this a little bit. All of those things would have a big impact on me.
Who's your favourite Doctor?
Tom Baker. Easy.
Although I did see a picture of you when you're dressed as Doctor number 5. So.
That's right. I did like Peter Davidson as well. But those are the people I grew up with. I was born when Tom Baker was Doctor, so the previous Doctors obviously didn't have as much kind of impact on me, because I was born during the Tom Baker years.
Brilliantly with the timing of the comedy. And as someone who really gets frustrated with editing, how do you approach going into filming, and do you have the editing in mind when you go into it?
Yeah, I think increasingly, actually, I think a good way of, if you get frustrated by the editing process, the way to solve that is to shoot the film in such a way that it can be edited in no other way. And in that sort of, it's almost the thing, like sort of, as you maybe get more experience, you start doing less coverage because you kind of know exactly what you want. Especially on Scott Pilgrim and World's End, I tried to do this thing where I would do like a sort of a different setup for every shot. So there's never like sort of not too many times there isn't dialogue bits, but other than that, I try not to do the same shot twice. I try not to cut back to the same shot, and especially with the action sequences, there is no other angle. Like sort of, so a lot of those fight scenes in World's End, like the shot that you see is the only shot of that part. There is no B camera. There's no other camera doing a wide. It's just designed to be in that moment. And in that case, like, it makes the editing really easy, because like you actually, even though we shot this on 35mm, we edited it on set. The fight scenes, at least. We didn't do the dialogue stuff. Is like, you know, it's going to take longer. So what we do is, because now you can kind of like take, like straight from the video assist, you can kind of sit there with a MacBook and just edit it on set. So with the fight scenes in particular, we would edit it as we went along, and we would shoot it in order as well. So by the end of a shooting day, so with that bathroom scene, I could show the actors like a rough of the scene, which would blow their minds. It's like, come and have a look. You know, even easier to do on digital, but like sort of you can do it on film as well by just taking it straight off the assist and then matching it from the sound later. But I think it's just something like, if it's something where, you know, if you can't kind of, if you're frustrated by the editing isn't kind of what you see in your head, then you either have to learn to edit yourself, or you shoot in such a way that like, that dictates the edit. I mean, that's what a lot of the sort of the directors in the 40s, like sort of John Ford and Alfred Hitchcock used to do that. Because they didn't, back then they didn't used to edit their movies. Like sort of, John Ford or Michael Curtis or Howard Hawks would do like 4 films in a year, and they would never edit them, but they would shoot them in such a way that they could be edited in no other way. So that's the other way to do it, really.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful, actually.
Cool.
Those fight scenes were amazing.
Thank you.
I was wondering, like, one of my favorites, I think, favorite works of yours is the TV show Spaced. And I was wondering, what was the inspiration behind that? I mean,
well, I didn't write that show, but how that show came about was I had done another show with Simon Pegg and Jessica Stevenson, now Hines, on this channel, this sort of cable channel called the Paramount Comedy Channel, and I started very young. Like when I'd done this like movie when I was 20, which I wasn't particularly kind of happy with, but it got me a break, got me an agent and stuff, and I started doing TV for Paramount Comedy Channel for lots of up and coming comedians like Matt Lucas and David Walliams, who do that show, Liz Brisson, like back 10 years before that show. We did a sketch show together, and then there was another show straight afterwards that I co-wrote with Dave. Simon and Jessica were in it, and they were so good together in their scenes that one of the producers said, hey, they should do a sitcom. So they went off and wrote like a couple of episodes of Spaced. And the good thing was that I was always on board as the director, so I would read the drafts very early on and sort of push them in certain directions, in terms of the visuals at least, So it was a great experience, because sometimes you can do a TV show and the director can be the last person to be hired, and the writer and the producer kind of have more power and more say, and the director is just there to do what the producer says. But in this case it was different, because the writers had suggested me to direct it, and then and also between the first draft of the script and actually shooting it was like 2 years. So I'd had a lot of time to think about it, So by the time we actually got to shoot it, sort of it had been in my head for a while. And it was also something where I was very sort of lucky to be directing TV so young. I directed the first series of Space when I was 24, and even then I felt at the time I felt really sort of fortunate because I am the same age as the characters, and that was and in a way that show was like a reaction against. There were a bunch of other like youth sitcoms on the BBC at the time. And other channels that were written by people in their 40s and 50s. So it always felt like, oh, that's not really speaking to us. You know, so it was like making a show. So one of the reasons that we did then do a third one is that, you know, once kind of you stop being that age, then you're as much of a charlatan as everybody else in a way. So you don't want to be a hypocrite and sort of be in your 30s pretending to be in your mid-20s, you know.
Is there a particular episode that you have very fond memories with, or your favorite?
I have fond memories of the whole show, and maybe the first series maybe more than the second series was more fun to film. However, my favourite episode of them all is in the second series, which is episode 5 of the second series, which is the one where they go out on a night in Camden, and it's the one with the finger gun fights and stuff. I think that's like I think maybe generally the first series is maybe better, but the best episode is in the second series. So like it was an amazing sort of time, and there's sort of weird things about that show that helped make it what it was that you would never get to do now, which was for some reason we never did a pilot for that show. Like we just made 7 episodes. They just let us make it on a very small budget. But that's unusual, you know. Now we do a pilot and then everybody would make lots and lots of comments, and so I often wonder whether the show is what it is because we just made a whole series without any interference.
Any plans or maybe interest in maybe having like a reunion, one of those reunion episodes where they now type thing?
I don't know. I mean, I didn't write the show, so I can't speak for. I always like defer this. I suggest, so I never have to answer it. But I also think, even though there are some great precedents for that, like you know, the Before Sunrise series is a great idea in terms of returning to those characters every 10 years. But I think there's something about Tim and Daisy that they should be left in their 20s, and you don't want to see them old. Am I right? Who would agree with me? Okay, good.
If you made a reunion, I'd watch it though. Let's see, before my question,
it's better imagined in your head.
Probably. I don't know. You'd probably do it better than me. Before my question, I want to say thanks for coming, and I'm a big fan, but I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with the casting choice. I wish you would pick Nathan Fillion for Ant-Man, but that's just my opinion, sorry. As far as questions go...
but you know nothing about him.
No, that's true. I'm imagining it in my head. So, I read...
Nathan Fillion can be in the Space Reunion episode.
That'd be amazing.
Totally projecting in your brain.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So, I read in an interview for The World's End that you preferred using gymnasts and dancers for your choreography and fight scenes. Was that something you've always done, or did you kind of learn that you preferred those types of actors as you went?
It had a big impact on this one. I think on like Scott Pilgrim, we had worked with some really great stunt people and and dancers as well. And like, there's a big overlap between stunts and dance, you know, because it's all about choreography. And in this one particularly, like all of the blanks, unlike the zombies where they're like sort of an amorphous mass. The idea with this is that they're all like sort of highly choreographed. And if you actually watch, like even in those running scenes where they're running down the street, the blanks were all running in time. And if you listen to the raw footage, you would hear like left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. You know. So we actually had stunt people, and we had dancers, and we also within the different teams of blanks, like at the most, in some of those street scenes, we had like 80 of them. We'd have these dance captains, that were like choreographers that would be in a group of 10. So they would be in charge of that group. So they could like, especially when they got those goggles on and like the flares are on, you cannot see their faces. You know, they can be whispering to the rest of their group. you know, going 5, 6, 7, 8, I don't know, you know, like this. So you can hear all that stuff. If you hear like if you listen to the door sequence without the music, all you would hear is that the choreographer going 5, 6, 7, 8.
Sounds so creepy.
It was creepy, but it's something that I like doing that kind of thing, and it made a lot of sense in this where they're robots, that they'll all be of a hive mind, that they'll all be moving in time. So we sort of worked a lot on that in terms of getting everybody to. And then also, but then you have to get everybody up to speed, like the stunt guy is going to have to learn sort of choreography, and but it was really good fun. I really liked that aspect of it. And there was something like with this one as well, is that we wanted to have the fights kind of erupt. The thing is, sometimes in films you can spot a stuntman right away, because they're of a particular type and build, and usually they're 6 foot and massive. And in this, for instance, the bathroom fight, those kids are all essentially teenage stunt performers. They're all like martial artists and gymnasts. Because I wanted it to be like, oh, this fight kicks off with these 15-year-olds, and like then there's no like doubling. Like those kids did all of the stunts in that bit. There is no stunt doubles. Right. So I wanted it to look kind of like strange and like say like the twins, like they're not stunt women, they're dancers. So they performed the stunt and they learned the fight. And it was the first time they'd done a fight before. But because they came from like a sort of a gymnastics, sort of rhythmic gymnastics dance background, they could learn the choreography, and then it's up to the stunt choreographer to teach them the fight. But I just wanted to make it so that people fighting didn't seem like the normal people that you'd have doing stunts, you know, not so obvious like stuntmen. So even with some of the stunt performers in the later bits, we usually went for like skinnier guys, gymnasts, not obvious like muscle men and stuff, so it would seem like they were all just normal residents, you know.
Yeah, not the Lucas Lee stunt team.
No, exactly. he's not quoting that song. He thinks like, oh yeah, this sounds good. The saying that I came up with. And when he quotes the Primal Stream bit at the end, like he almost does it like sort of just...
So it's just so burned into his brain by now that, yeah.
I think that's the thing, is I think sort of like... I think there's a lot of people who do that kind of thing where they sort of like they... I remember this particularly at school and college people, or maybe I even used to do it, where like, this is before the days of the internet, it was easy to figure those things out, where people would like take things from films or like comedy shows and sort of pass them off as their own. Like, this is my bit that I do. So it's kind of a bit like that he's like sort of just, these lyrics are burned into his brain, and like, because there's another one he sort of repeats, like Twist the Melon from Happy Mondays as a bit of advice, you know. So, but it was really fun. I mean, the thing you have to do with that is then you have to make sure you can clear those songs. Because, so all of those ones, all of the ones that they actually mention or sing along to have to be cleared before, otherwise you're screwed, you know. Yeah. Other stuff, you know, that's like, is just playing, and like, we had a plan for them all, but, you know, that can be kind of tricky, because like, sometimes if you, luckily, like, the people who own like the Soup Dragons, oh, I saw that. You know, the Soup Dragons song is a Rolling Stones song, and that is actually why in this country, like the World's End soundtrack is out on ABKCO, the Stones label, is because like they own that copyright, like and so they released the album and stuff. So they're actually really helpful, because I think otherwise, like sort of that song would be a lot more expensive than you would imagine, because it's like a Jagger Richards song. But it's, with those things, it's like really, like, it's tricky, especially if you're doing a low-budget film, it's really tricky, like, to clear, like, there's a lot of songs in that movie, and in this day and age, it's a little easier, because people generally want to be, like, on a soundtrack rather than not on a soundtrack, and even like a band like The Doors, which maybe, like, 10 years ago, be a lot more difficult than it is now. There's only a couple of bands that are, like, sort of famously tricky, like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles, you know. Yeah, it's, you know, it's, I mean, we've always like written things into the script. Usually what you should do though, and this is a Tarantino trick, or rather he learned to his peril. I think when he did Reservoir Dogs, he had Steal His Wheel written into the script, and the publishers of that song saw it written into the script, and so they charged him like quadruple, because they knew it was like important. So if you want to use a song, do not write it into the screenplay. Like, keep that close to your chest, you know, and like, because you shouldn't let people know how important it is to you.
Worked out for Tarantino in the end.
Yeah, but I think he's all had to pay a lot more for that one because they knew it was this song or nothing, you know. Yeah. And we've been in that situation before. It's like sometimes there's songs where it's like with this movie, like we nearly didn't clear the doors, and I had to sort of move some other budget things around to kind of be able to afford it. And as soon as we'd done a screening with the Doors song in there, it was like, oh, we got to use that song. There's nothing, and the B choice was nowhere near as good. And we played it in on set as well. Like so, I even when we were shooting that scene, I got all paranoid because I thought if anybody like filmed us making it and that ended up on YouTube with that song playing, then they would know, like, oh, I see how important this is to your scene. Let's charge them double.
Thanks again.
No worries.
I do believe we may be running out of time because we actually have another movie to screen. But
Lady Terminator is supposed to be amazing.
Have you seen it?
I haven't, but I hear it's great.
Dude, okay, the first 20 minutes will change your life.
I cannot stay. I will watch it another time. But I think if we get through these quick, we'll get through these.
Yeah.
To Boba Fett 4. Let's do them quick.
Yeah,
thanks.
And everybody gets their question answered.
Thanks. So you're in pre-production right now, and I was just wondering, as you make more and more films, is that something that gets easier, or is it still kind of hectic, that whole process?
It's not hectic as much as it says there's always like different problems with each kind of movie, and always unique to that movie. So they all have their sort of own unique kind of sort of challenges, and nothing is the same. And like so, something it'll always be something you haven't done before. You know, I think that's probably a good place to be in. Is you don't really want to get complacent or just kind of start saying, oh yeah, I know how to do this. You know.
And your storyboards, I remember seeing an interview where you said like Simon Pegg had his own kind of figure the way you drew him in the storyboard, so like that's something that kind of got easier.
Yeah, I draw everything, even the dialogue scenes. I draw absolutely everything. Usually what I do is I do really quick thumbnail sketches and then board artists do it. Okay. You know, so on World's End, like I did thumbnails and then my brother and another board artist did the finished ones that you can see on the Blu-ray.
Oh, hey, thanks a lot.
Cool.
Recently saw on Criterion, their website, that you gave them a list of your top 10 favorite movies, and my favorite one that you put was your number 11 favorite of your top 10, which was Two-Lane Blacktop, and I thought that was interesting because it is nothing like any of your movies. I've loved that movie for a long time, and I've loved your movies, but I don't see the influence there, so I've always wanted to know, of all the movies that have ever been made that you've seen, which is the movie you wish you had made and why?
Well, you know, like, films that you love don't necessarily have to have an influence on your work, you know. I mean, I love, I don't know, like, sort of, I don't think that it is always something that has an impact. I mean, I love, like, films, I like those kind of, even though they're nothing like my films, you know, films like Walter Hill's The Driver is one of my favourite films, and, like, you know, I like Two-Lane Black, so I like those kind of, like, minimal films with, like, hardly any dialogue, which is obviously nothing like the films I've made. In terms of if there's a film that I wish I'd made, I don't really feel like that anymore. I think sometimes before I'd made a movie, I used to watch kind of films, I don't know, when I was like, way before Sean, I'd see something like Scream and go, oh god, I wish I could have made something like that. But now I think like, I feel like those films like exist without you, like sort of, oh. So I never had, I can't think of anything where, especially if it's a film I really like, then that film exists perfectly well without me. So like, what could I add to it, you know? What can I add to the movie Gremlins? It's already perfect. It's already perfect. Hey, Boba Fett.
Hey, thank you, sir. So someone asked if you could be their teacher, so I'll just ask you, can you adopt me? But seriously, I teach film history in this school, and what we did at the end of the school year was go into experimental film. So I think a really easy way to get kids into that was to just show scenes from Scott Pilgrim. And that really worked with them, and I started noticing there were a lot of things juxtaposed to people like Stan Brakhage, who made these really crazy films. So I thought, you know, there has to be some kind of connection, but I need to know, like, were you ever influenced by those people who were really doing, like, cameraless film editing or things like that? And, like, is it difficult to put that in your films?
I found that when I was at art college and I did, like, film history, usually it would be something that the ones that, there'd be a link to something that I already knew, and it would like be going backwards. Like somebody like Louis Buñuel, like on Salvador Dali, but Louis Buñuel, I used to really like his movies because I could see, oh, I see where Monty Python comes from. Like Monty Python, they love like Ingmar Bergman, and like they love Louis Buñuel, and you know, if you watch something like Simon of the Desert, you go, oh, this is kind of a bit like Life of Brian. It's like you can see where people that you already like and already know got their ideas from. So it's sometimes a good way with film history is to take something you like now and then go backwards to see what they like. So, you know, the answer is yes, in terms of like, some of the things like in Scott Pilgrim would be, like you mentioned Stan Brakhage in terms of the scratchy animation at the start, or like, you know, like a pop art from the 60s, you know, or like sort of any of those kind of like sort of pop arty kind of comic movies of that time, whether it was like Danger Diabolique. I don't know if you've ever seen that, a Mary Barr film. Like, I love that movie, and like to probably know it better as the movie that's featured in the Beastie Boys body moving video. But like stuff like that. So I think that is an interesting thing, and if you're trying to sort of inspire students to look backwards, it's good to sort of do the reverse of saying, oh, you know, like, look at this film here. This is the film that inspired it, and then that film inspired that. You can, you know, you can trace back from Drive to Walter Hill's The Driver to you know, Pickpocket, you know, and so you can go backwards. And I used to find like sort of the, you know, I used to like horror and stuff, you know, so it was not a big leap from like 70s Dario Argento films to kind of like to Louis Buñuel. There was a kind of like, there was a link there, you know, so I think that's kind of interesting, yeah.
Well, you're now what people learn from, so thank you for that.
Thank you. Last one. Last one.
Well, I have a
you
question.
get sitting ring down.
Well, yeah, exactly. I have a question. It's actually from one of my buddies. He fractured his arm yesterday, so he couldn't come down here. We got to find it. He was just asking if you're going to be doing any more screenings during your time in Atlanta, and if you're going to be working with any local websites.
Oh, I don't know about websites. Maybe if I'm here for a while, maybe it would be fun to do some screenings. I did that when I was in Toronto. Yeah, that could be fun.
Okay, and my question is, can you envision a time in your life where you're not working on a project with Simon Pegg or Nick Frost?
No, I'd always love to work with them. And one of the nicest things about doing this movie was being back with them, and you know, like, we definitely consider this like a trilogy, and this is the end of that trilogy, but that doesn't mean we won't work together again. It's too much fun. Too much fun. Like, it's I feel very fortunate to be able to write a movie with my best friend and then it star my best friend, you know? It doesn't happen very often. And the fact that he also happens to be a really good actor. So that helps. That all helps. I think we have to wrap it up, and we have to... Apparently Lady Terminator was amazing though. I hear it's great.
Before we actually... I'll need some mic, but before I do want to say thank you so much for reaching out to us. I don't think in our 20-year history no one has ever actually contacted us and say like, hey, Winky Dinky, my movie's playing while I'm in town. Can I visit? No,
this makes me better than any other living person.
At the beer theme, and the staff here at Cinefest would like to present you with a little gift.
Is it local?
Actually, no, it's not.
It's so close.
It's seasonal though. It was bought locally. Yeah, it's bought locally.
It's Belgian style. It's good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I love that you're going to send me onto the streets of Atlanta with like booze and bag. Edgar Wright's lost it already.